This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Howard Shapiro. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Gwen, and we're two people with PhDs talking about comics.
That's right. And today we're going to be talking with Howard Shapiro. His new book, Hockey Karma, came out a few days ago from Animal Media Group. But before we get to that conversation, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off the cover price. Sometimes as much as 50% off cover. But many times, you can find discounts that go higher than that.
That's right, Derek. And in keeping with the sports theme of our talk today, wanted to let our listeners know that Discount Comic Book Service is featuring the first of a 4-part graphic novel series called Strange Sports Stories that includes short comics from the likes of Gabriel Hernandez, Paul Pope, and Lauren Buquez. This is a great collection. It's offered at $8.99, which is 40% off the cover price.
You know, you can't beat those prices at Discount Comic Book Service when it comes to sports comics or really any kind of comics whatsoever. So go to dcbservice.com. They'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your books there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that Gwen and Derek sent you. So, Gwen, we had a really nice conversation with Howard Shapiro about the new book, Hockey Karma, but we also talked with him about his earlier works, for instance, the Stereotypical Freaks and the Hockey Saint, and these were part of his Forever Friends series, of which Hockey Karma is the most recent example.
Yeah, and you know what I really liked about his comics, and I think our listeners will too, is that intersection of rock and roll and sports. And I love the playlists for every chapter in his graphic novels. In fact, it's really funny. Some of those songs I know so well, I absolutely not only could think of all the lyrics immediately, but think about how they're related to the chapters. So I think it would be a lot of fun, especially if you want to introduce a younger person to the music of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. It would be a lot of fun to do that with this comic.
Yeah, and I like the way that you put it, introduce a younger person to some of this music, because I think that many of these books in the Forever Friends series are written with younger readers in mind, and we even asked him about that during the interview. It's something that I think would tap into many of the interests that some younger readers would have, not only music, but also in sports, and also the kind of ins and outs of relationships at that age.
Absolutely. It was really great talking to him.
Yeah, well, then let's share this interview with our listeners. We're pleased to have on the Comics Alternative Howard Shapiro. He is the writer of Hockey Karma, which came out at the very beginning of November from Animal Media Group. Howard, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Derek. It's great to be on with you and Gwen.
You know, in introducing the new book, Hockey Karma, maybe we can do so by having a little context from you about the Forever Friends series that Hockey Karma is a part of. So just give us a brief rundown of what this series is and some of the earlier books that were a part of the series.
Sure. Well, in 2012, the first book, which is called The Stereotypical Freaks, came out. And that the whole idea with that was it was going to be a one-off book, just sort of standalone. And it's about four kind of disparate kids who come together for a Battle of the Bands competition in their high school. And there's a couple of twists and turns in that. It's not just as simple as, that kind of story. It's got some really emotional stuff in it. And so, again, that was going to be the first standalone. I was going to kind of veer off into something else with the next book. A guy I met at the Book Expo America in 2013 in New York City who had read the book told me that's one of the things I should think about is doing it as a series. So I did a little bit of a twist to get the main character, Tom, into a situation that involved hockey because I had done two hockey books back in 2007, 2008, which were pretty well received and still to this day sell. So I have a bit of an audience here in the U.S. and a lot up in Canada, where hockey books are sell very well. So I wanted to get back to doing that, and so we came up with an idea to get Tom into a hockey-type situation, and so we did that in 2014, and now wrap things up with Hockey Karma in 16. And I always like to point out that they're not, even though there's a hockey theme, it's not necessarily a hockey-centric or sports-centric story. It's really about the two main characters, Tom and Jake, and their friendship. And also, one other thing I always want to point out, too, is that people ask me this all the time. It's not necessary to read the first book or the second book to get the third book, and vice versa, also with the second book and the first book. In that respect, I didn't feel it was fair or right to say to somebody, well, okay, this is the second in a series, so you have to get the first one to know everything that's going on. As a bonus, though, for somebody who did read the first one or the second one, the third one kind of ties things up, and we bring back some of the characters from the first one. But it's been a really wonderful experience. I've worked with so many talented people, and I just really couldn't be happier with the way everything turned out.
You mentioned a moment ago the earliest hockey narratives that you created. Now those were prose, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the first was 2007. It's called Hockey Days, which is a picture book, kids' picture book, really about the relationship and how hockey brought myself and my dad together when I was growing up. And then I did a middle grade novel called Hockey Player for Life, which came out the year after that.
Now, well, I was going to ask, especially in terms of Hockey Player for Life, was there any kind of carryover from that to the comics that you were writing later? For instance, any characters or settings or situations?
Yeah, it's a good question, because the main character, which is Tom Leonard, has actually been, I did 3 self-published books way back when in 2005, 6, and I've kind of carried that character throughout. So he started out as a 6 and 7-year-old kid, and then he worked his way up to 13, and it's sort of just worked through his life, and it's been fun in a way, because that character's sort of my doppelganger, and I like to bring some of the things from my life experiences I've had and situations that may have gone good or may have gone bad, and work those in. So yeah, the one main character, Tom Leonard, has been in actually each of my books over the years. Again, it didn't start out that way; it just sort of just kind of went from book to book and worked out that way.
Well, Howard, I'd love to hear a little bit about your own hockey career. Did you start playing when you were super young, and did you end up playing through maybe to college?
You know what? I actually started when just as a young kid. We play street hockey in our backyard, and then we'd go up to the tennis court. And it always I didn't start playing ice hockey until I was in high school. And
okay.
The thing was, so yeah, and that was it. I stopped really playing, although I'm trying to just turn 51, so I'm going to try and get in an over 50 league now coming up. But yeah, it was the thing is, my high school years, again, sophomore, junior, senior, were it was a very tough situation, and just the whole growing up and adolescence and everything. And the thing was that the one thing that was grounded me, so to speak, was playing the game of hockey. It was I learned, because I wasn't a very good player, and I was playing with guys played, starting when they were 3 or 4 years old. Well, I didn't really pick it up ice skating wise until I was 13. So I was way behind the curve. And, but the thing is, it really taught me so much about, the value of hard work, the being a member of a team, and just things like that, which I had never got from other sports, and especially the ability to work hard, because I knew if the only thing I could handle, the only thing that was in my control was the ability to outwork, the opposition, or even the guys on my team in practice, and that was the only way I was going to get more playing time and whatever. So I really learned the value of hard work, I think. And just again, there's just something special about the game, not only watching it, but playing it. And so it really taught me so much in life lessons. As I mentioned, my dad and I, we became closer through it, and had some really special memories of that. So the game's always left a real indelible mark on me. And I always felt like, it's a way of paying the game back by doing these books. And so it's something that's very special in my life, as opposed to other things that, other sports or other activities that didn't necessarily have the impact that hockey did.
So you told us a little bit about your own experiences with hockey and how those experiences informed your graphic novels. What about your experience with music? Because in reading Hockey Karma, and then the previous books as well in this series, definitely hockey comes through as an overriding theme of how you structure the relationships and everything in your narratives. But music does that as well. So what is it about your love for music that you brought it to the Forever Friends series?
Well, right. I use I do the thing where I put recommended listing songs. And the reason I started doing that, going back to when I did Stereotypical Freaks, is because I thought it was important to, even if nobody cared, it was important to me to put the songs. Music is something very important. Actually, most of my inspiration for writing comes from music and lyrics, and it's a way that I can really, it gets me in the zone, so to speak, when I'm writing, is to have music on in the background, certain music, certain songs and whatnot. And music has also made an important, mark on my life. The title Forever Friends comes from a lyric in the song Backstreets by Bruce Springsteen, and a very powerful song, and one I really love. So it was just, I thought that having, I like putting those recommended songs in there because, and some have to do with a song maybe I'm listening to while I'm doing that chapter, or some sort of relate to the chapter maybe in the title alone. So it was something that really I enjoyed doing, and I wanted to make sure that that was pointed out, that those songs and the music in and of itself really is my inspiration. Provides a lot of inspiration for me when I'm doing my writing. So and it was a fun thing. A lot of people like that, and question me or whatever. I got some bad feedback from the first one because I used a lot of classic rock songs, and people are like, wow, those songs are 30 years old. So I kind of switched things up with the next two books, or at least try to put some more modern songs in there. But it's something that's fun, but the music does and has had a big part, or is a big part of my writing.
Well, there was a good bit of Green Day in the first book and Stereotypical Freaks.
Right. Well, they actually, because the band, that was the nice thing I was able to kind of connect it to, because the band, it was playing those songs. So that was part of it for sure. And they did mention, like, oh geez, I'm drawing a blank on the Deftones and when they were talking about it. So there were some modern touches in there, but not enough for for some people who were very vocal about my choice of songs in that book.
Yeah, I see in the acknowledgments page in Hockey Karma, the first group of folks that you give thanks to: Bruce Springsteen, Big Country, Rush, U2, Pete Townsend, The Who, Bob Dylan, The Rolling Stones, The Clash, Rancid, Green Day, Eric Clapton, and Ray Davies.
Yeah, those were
great lineup.
Sort of the main. Yeah, that'd be a great concert. Those are all the songs that I really listened to, or I was listening to at the time when I was writing, and I would listen to them sort of in a loop on YouTube, just over and over and over again, and very helpful. And a little later in that section, I list my friend Tom Cochran, who's a Canadian singer-songwriter. Did Life is a Highway, which is a big hit. But him and I are friends, and his music has also been a big inspiration to me as well. So it definitely plays a role in it, and in writing. And so this is kind of two. And the term, or the saying that write about what you love. I mean, music outside of my family and so forth. Music and hockey are my two of my favorite things. So. It makes it easy to write for sure.
I'm just laughing because when Derek suggested Green Day, I'm thinking, didn't they start in the 80s? And sure enough, I just looked it up and they did. So I think the young people probably group Green Day with The Who at this point, which makes me feel super young.
Well, you're exactly right. They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now. So they're like old timers now.
Wow. See, it's interesting because I still think of Green Day as a relatively recent band. But they did get started in the 80s. To me, I see, The Who, The Jam, then Green Day. But
right, and that's how it was. But still, it's like that. All of that was like still in the 80s. So
that's true. But see, and I mentioned the Jam to some of my students, and they look at me blankly. And so I say Paul Weller, Style Council, and they look at me even more blankly. But
Howard.
I was just going to say those. What you said. That's a good lineage. I mean, The Who, the Jam. I mean, the Jam influenced so many bands, and that was one thing I think I tried to point out to some of the people who would say, well, about classic rock and whatever. But it's funny because for Hockey Karma, it's not like I didn't listen to that music. I just it wasn't necessarily at the forefront. So, but it is interesting how different generations, because I would get the same thing with some of like who are these guys and kind of thing. It's like, well, maybe you should listen because they anything you're listening to now, they were probably influenced by these guys or girls.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought about when I was reading this text, and I think maybe Hockey Saints a little bit more, is there's actually an overlap between a lot of the tensions and the pressures that rock and roll stars experience and that major sports stars experience. Maybe you'd want to talk just a little bit about how that filtered into these texts.
Yeah, the thing was with the music part, and there is some, it's funny because I think a lot of musicians want to be athletes and athletes want to be musicians, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You always hear about a certain guy. We had a guy here in Pittsburgh who named Charlie Morton who was tried to be a quasi musician, and it's like Bruce Willis when he tried to get his being an actor. And everyone wants to be something they're not. But no, but it's a good point you bring up, Gwen, because one of the things that Jeremiah Jacobson, Jake, is he's known, and it kind of goes along with that, where he doesn't want he's sort of the face of the league, or he's the best player in the league, but he doesn't want to have anything to do with sort of the celebrity of it aspect of it. He doesn't do media interviews, he doesn't do endorsements, and so he kind of shies away from that part of it, that kind of rock star type of thing, he's just like one of those players who just wants to play, and he doesn't want all the stuff that goes along with it. So he was kind of modeled on not necessarily musicians or rock stars, but on athletes such as Jim Brown, Arthur Ashe, Ricky Williams. These are guys who, Ricky Williams and Jim Brown, and Barry Sanders for that matter, retired at an early age, and didn't want to just be known as athletes or football players or what have you.
Right.
In Jacobson, he does a lot of charitable work, but again, under the radar, and that was actually inspired by speaking of musicians. I went to a Bruce Springsteen symposium up in Monmouth, New Jersey, about 6 years ago, and it was really interesting. And one of the things they brought up somebody had a picture of when he was at a food bank, and they took a picture, and it was just him in the middle of like 6 or 7 other people. And, that was the first, I had heard of that type of thing. I mean, I know he donates money all the time, anytime he's on tour. And, and I thought, and so we had Jacobson, volunteering at a food bank in the Hockey Saint and then continuing in Hockey Karma. And that was really based on that, just seeing that picture of Springsteen, where they said the person who ran the food bank was on stage, and she was talking about that. And she said he just came in one day and said, and there's no camera crew, there was no, media or whatever. He's just like, how can I help? And so that's where I really got the idea to do that. Yeah, I mean, if you can imagine that, I don't think he made a habit of it, but that he would do that, and that's the way, and that's one of the things we had Jacobson do and continue doing throughout both books, where he has a real interest in hunger, and what I actually did in the second book, but we had to cut it out, was a story which related to my life, where he then shows, and because Tom would asks him, well, why is hunger, why is that mean, why is that something that's so important to you to combat hunger? And he has a story about how him and a friend, and I hated to cut it off, but I just had to because it was too long. But he and this is what happened in my life, where I had a friend, and we used to take food around to houses this is called Meals on Wheels. And so I did that for a while when I was growing up, and I went over to, and it turns out that my one friend, and he opened the door, and it was him, and I was like shocked, and and we sort of, and he kind of, our friendship sort of ended almost over that, because I think he was kind of ashamed that his family was getting food delivered to them, and so that had a real profound effect on me, and I wanted to work that in the worst way, but it just took too long, and we ended up editing it out. But yeah, that was so. He's kind of circling back to what you asked. I think he just wants to kind of avoid that quote unquote rock star lifestyle, and which is kind of different. You see a lot of players these days, with the endorsements and social media now, especially, and things like that. We cut it out. Another thing we had to cut out, he didn't even really know how to use a computer. So, cut out any type of being on Twitter or Facebook or Snapchat or whatever. So, yeah, he's a very fun character to write for sure.
Well, one of the things you're discussing here in answer to Gwen's earlier question is the cult of celebrity or personality, right? And that's one of the things that both music or popular music and popular sports have in common. They create celebrities and establish certain ideals, by which at least some of its participants feel that they need to adhere to. And one of the things that's so striking about your character of Jake Jacobson is that he refuses to be a part of that culture, right? I mean, he does the things like you were just describing, working anonymously in a food bank, not letting anyone know that. He's not someone who makes himself accessible or is even amenable to the press. And I'm wondering, is this something with your experience and your love of hockey, is this something that is an issue within hockey, and were you bringing that to the fore in your books, specifically Hockey Saint? This tension with celebrity.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and pretty much spot on. I mean, one of the themes, there are a couple of things going on when I wrote that, and the first was the here in Pennsylvania. I'm in Pittsburgh, but up at Penn State, the Sandusky trial, the arrest, and everything was going on. And so the two things I wanted to bring out that were really forefront for me at that point in time was, you had this situation up in Penn State where it was like everyone just turned a blind eye because of sports, and I mean, I love sports, and I play fantasy hockey, and the whole bit. I mean, I'm as big a sports fan, but you get to a certain point where it should not take over the news of the day or it's the important things. It's a distraction, and it's entertainment, and that's up there, football was life, and so everybody turned a blind eye to what was going on, and it was really, truthfully, it was disgusting, and so that was something I was and again, Penn State's about 3 hours from Pittsburgh. So, and there's a gazillion Penn State alums here in Pittsburgh. So it was a very front burner issue. And just that whole idea of all that just went on just because of the importance of football, Joe Paterno's legacy and blah, blah, blah. So that was one of the issues. The other, as you said, was celebrity. And, that was, when I did that, it was, Twitter had been around a while, but it was becoming a thing where, such and such put a tweet out and, people are up in arms because such and such did that, or a Facebook post or whatever. And again, it's just that, so it's kind of the combination of that with the celebrity plus that just, craziness over sports and also one of the characters, or the Jacobson, I shouldn't say character, but one of the real life people he's a little bit based on is Sidney Crosby, who's here in Pittsburgh, who is kind of I made him as the anti-Sidney Crosby, because what he does is he goes out of his way to promote the league. He goes out of his way to answer questions from the media. I mean, he's a model citizen. And I wanted to kind of create a character who was the anti-Sidney Crosby. He should be held up as someone who, if you the idea of hero worship, even though I think it's kind of ridiculous to worship any athlete, many people do. And if you're going to, well, then, Sidney Crosby's maybe somebody you can feel good about doing that. But just that idea of also the hero worship, Charles Barkley, where, he said, I'm not, in the commercial with the Nike commercial, he said, I'm not a role model for your kids. And so that was also something that I was kind of playing around with. So it was really those three things: the idea of celebrity, the idea of sports being so insane and important in people's lives, and also the idea of worshiping athletes, when it should be, if you're going to have heroes, it should be, family members, teachers, that kind of thing.
Now, along with this, I wanted to ask you about your intended audience for not just Hockey Karma, but most of your books, because they seem to have those kind of messages that you were just describing, right? That there's certain people that should be held up as role models, not the kind that you usually think of, or a popular culture tends to put forward as role models. So is your intended audience, or as you're sitting down to write these books, and you're thinking of the kind of people who are going to be reading them, are they going to be young adults, younger readers?
Yeah, Derek, it's another really good question, because it's something when I go to schools, and I go maybe 3 or 4 times a year and do school visits, I talk about, because one of the things I really tried to do, even from the very first book I did, was not necessarily, I don't know if challenge is the right word, but not talk down or pander to the reading audience. And the second book I did was about it was an anti-bullying story, and the reason I did it is because my kids, who were I think 7 at the time, they came home with a book about bullying, and it was a book about, it was using butterflies, I think, or something as a metaphor for bullying, and it enraged me, because I'm thinking, the kid's not going to get that, and you have to use real life experiences. And so I did that, and I used, again, Tom was in there, and, it was just one of those things where I never want to, I kind of gear the books, they might be, this one particularly, it's talking about gender equality, the gender gap, wage gap, I should say. There's substance abuse issues, things like that. But I really think that, it can go really from 12 or 13-year-olds on up. And, even again, I like the idea of challenging the person reading it. And maybe you don't get everything or all the nuance, and maybe that's for older readers, but I really like that idea. And I've always done the books. There's the part in Hockey Player for Life, which is a middle grade novel, where I was talking about domestic violence. The one player has an issue where his dad's basically abusing him. And I didn't shy away from it, and no one's ever said, well, you should put that in there. I like that idea of challenging the reader, no matter what their age is, and again, not necessarily pandering, where it's like making it so simplistic and so, easy. I like that. I mean, I like when I read a story to have that. I just, I was in an event in New York last weekend. We were talking about the Vision series, and I'm saying how wonderful it was, and how it just the ending. It was emotionally, it was a jolt, and I like that kind of thing. I like, again, this might just be me personally, but I like that kind of thing where, or that type of story where it has an emotional, a real emotional jolt.
You're talking about the current Tom King run?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's phenomenal, that last story.
I've heard so many good things about that.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I haven't actually. I just kind of got at the end, but the last few issues. But we were talking about it, and it's great. And again, that's not something that the average reader might have seen coming. And I think that's wonderful when that kind of thing happens. That's something you read over and over again. And I really hope that through the years that my books, the same thing can happen. Someone could not just read it once, but hopefully several times, because you get something maybe each time that's maybe a little more or a little different, and it is hopefully a challenge. But I like writing that way, and I hope it resonates with people who are reading the book.
Well, I was really actually excited to see as well in Hockey Karma that you have a woman as the coach of the team. I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, that was, it was actually based on, there's, down your way, Derek, in Texas and San Antonio, there's a coach named Becky Hammond, who's the assistant coach for the San Antonio Spurs. And so she was sort of and again, I'm not a big NBA fan, but I just thought it was great. And I think it's long overdue. And in hockey now there are several, I think there's 5 skating coaches, which is kind of it's not an assistant coach or obviously a head coach, but at least it's making inroads. And you have to go back to 1996 before there was that was the last woman who was in an executive position for a team, which again is at least on the pro level. So again, long overdue. But it's 20 years, so it hasn't happened since. So so anyway, Becky Hammond was the model for that character, and I just thought it would be something that was and my wife at the time when I was writing the book did a story on a documentary, I should say, for our local public channel here on the gender wage gap, and it was a very powerful show, documentary, and I wanted to kind of have that where the coach says that she should be making the same, not 70% of what XYZ coach is making. I just thought that was important to point out. So again, I'm not trying to hit people over the head with it. It's kind of a subtle thing, but I wanted to address that, and so I thought that was the best way to do that, by having a female coach. And I think one other thing on that topic is that it really took a lot of courage. Or some courage, maybe not a lot, but it took courage on Greg Popovich, who's the head coach, to bring Becky Hammond in. And I wanted, Jacobson has a really good, and the story has a good relationship with his coach, and I wanted him to kind of be like a Greg Popovich, where he's like, it doesn't matter that that she's a female, she's qualified and is the best person for this job, and hence she is hired. So. So I just thought it was kind of a nice thing to be able to work through, and also kind of give a little dig to at some of the sports writers who, at least the hockey media, is filled with a lot of, not the best, most progressive group in the world, and I wanted to kind of give them a little bit of a shot as well, subtle shot. So Emma, the coach, brings that up a little bit.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
How they're just waiting. Some of these guys are just waiting for her to like cry at the news conference or whatever, and then they can say that have that line which they have already written, that she's not a great coach because she's not she's an emotional female or something. So I wanted to kind of really blast that a lot, and so that was fun to do. So,
well, it makes me laugh a little too, because I grew up in Flint, Michigan, which is a big hockey town. I'm about your age too, and all my friends played hockey. I didn't, because I was a wimp. I played tennis, but all of my friends were in the young women's league was called the Ringettes. And so, I grew up in a culture where hockey was so pervasive that everyone played it except for me. And so it was sort of nice to see this as a natural, move for this young woman whose dad was a coach. And obviously, so you did a nice job of giving her backstory just enough that you could also see where she got her love for hockey. And she's one of the people who's instrumental in helping Jake, which I thought was really cool too. So I thought it was really well done.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And that was the idea, is to kind of, give him, have her, be a stronger character in some ways than he is, and not just kind of like, well, he's a star player and I'm just going to let him do whatever he wants, which happens whether it's a male coach or female coach sometimes. And you're exactly right. I mean, there's the game itself. I mean, women's hockey has taken off so much over the years. The Olympic Games, the Olympic teams, it's great hockey to watch. And there's so many. When I did a signing down at a rink a couple years ago, and there was a girls tournament, and it was packed. It was packed out. So it's definitely growing, and I hope the girls, are able to get the same things, that the boys get as far as teamwork and, like I say, hard work, things like that you get from the game. So it's great. I mean, and even sled hockey and things like that as well. So it's great to see the game grow. And she was just such a fun character to write, and I just had a really good time with that. And that conversation I referenced is between her and the reporter Jalith, who's Tom's on and off girlfriend in the story. And I like that idea of those two sort of going head to head. Both strong, very strong characters, and neither backing down from the other, and so it was very fun to write that.
Well, Tom's grandma's pretty tough too, so you got some serious women going on there.
Well, that was I appreciate that. She was actually based on my grandmother, who was really tough as nails, came through the depression, and gave no quarter to anybody and didn't suffer fools. But that was a lot of fun to do, to write her as well. And we thought about bringing her back in this one, but they're just, again, I really like to keep, when I do my books or stories, I really like to keep the circle very small, like 5-6 characters. So as much as I wanted to kind of bring her back, we just decided against it. But they're fun characters to write for sure. And again, you use a little bit based on somebody. At least I've done that, where it's based on somebody in reality, but then kind of tweak things a little bit. So, but thank you. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, she was a real tough cookie.
Well, you mentioned Jalith, and we first saw her in the Stereotypical Freaks, and we saw her more from a distance than anything, right? She was the ideal love interest of Tom Leonard, but you really flesh her out quite a bit more in Hockey Karma. You give her three-dimensionality, and even though I wouldn't say that she's two-dimensional, like, the typical high school cheerleader, let's say, in Stereotypical Freaks, we do get to see a little bit of her roundedness, so to speak, but I think we definitely see it in this new book. Now, I'm mentioning Jalith because you said a moment ago something about your wife doing a documentary, and we see Jalith in Hockey Karma as a journalist who's talking with Emma in order to write up one of her stories. And so, I mean, I'm wondering, you've already mentioned that some of Tom is based on some of your past experiences, and then Jalith sounds like some of the things she's done represents or reflects of, your wife's journalism. How much of your own life and your own life experiences have you embedded in your Forever Friends books?
You know what? It's actually a good amount. I mean, to put a percentage, I'd say maybe like 60% or so. The J-Lith character is actually based on a girl who I knew in high school, and their relationship in high school is sort of like the relationship that myself and the girl who she's based on had. There's the one scene in Stereotypical Freaks where he's coming around the corner and he sees her kissing this other guy, and that same scene exactly happened with me when I was in high school, and it was absolutely broke my heart, and jolted. It was terrible, and but that so yeah, there's definitely some it's the things that again, the way I write it is there's again a good portion of it's based on things that happen to me, but then the beauty of having being a writer of fiction, especially, is that you can change what happened in the story. From real life, doesn't have to necessarily be the way things happen in the story. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as far as her when she's a reporter and things like that, that was kind of just something that. I have to say and give credit to the wonderful editor I have. His name's Christina Hickey. She had the idea of making her into a reporter, and I kind of took things from there. But that actually was her idea, because I kind of told her how I wanted things to go, and she came up with the idea of having her as a newspaper reporter. Plus, I think I wanted to send a little shout out to the newspapers, since they seem to be dying right and left, and I might be the last one of the few. My mom and I think, were the last subscribers to newspapers here in Pittsburgh. So we wanted to have her be a newspaper reporter as opposed to TV reporter. But yeah, the overall, I think there's parts of the stories that, again, are sort of ripped straight from things that happened in my life, but then again we kind of play around with things a little bit here and there to kind of fit the story.
One of the things I've noticed in your Forever Friends series, or at least the graphic novels, and I did read them in chronological order. So I started with the Stereotypical Freaks, then the Hockey Saint, and then the most recent book that came out about a week and a half ago, Hockey Karma. And I noticed that I guess the main connective tissue, which is the character Tom Leonard, his presence within each narrative seems to diminish a little with each successive book. So obviously he was front and center with the Stereotypical Freaks because he is the driving force behind, the battle of the band and trying to win the heart of J-Lith and all of that. I mean, there's much more going on in Stereotypical Freaks than Tom's story, but Tom's story is basically what drives that narrative, at least for me. In the Hockey Saint, he, I think, plays a little less of a role, but nonetheless central, right? In other words, if you extract Tom from the Hockey Saint, then you don't get the Hockey Saint. And then we get to Hockey Karma. Now, he plays an important role in Hockey Karma, but I don't think near the central role that he played in the previous two books. And I'm wondering if, in writing these three books for the Forever Friends series, if you yourself sensed, going from one manuscript to the next, that Tom seemed to have less of a narrative presence in the plotting.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're very, very accurate in that, and it was something that myself and the Christina, my editor, talked about a lot. I was of the opinion of putting Tom more sort of in the forefront, as especially with Hockey Karma, and as opposed to sort of like that 50-50 split between them. And it was her idea, and I kind of bought into it that we'll put Jake more in the front, or make it his story. He's sort of the driving force, and that was. So we did have those discussions, and it worked out. But I think and the character of Jake was so much fun to write, because again he's such a flawed character, and those, it's like an actor would probably most of them will always say, well, playing the villain's much better than playing the good guy. And for me, at least for writing, the flawed character is so much more fun than writing sort of the straight and narrow character. So in this case, we really wanted to, it became, as the books went on, and I think pretty much as you said, the second Tom took a little bit of a backseat, and then that was maybe sort of a 50-50, and definitely this became sort of Jake's story. Tom, with the B story, so to speak, and it was definitely a conscious decision, and I think again that's the part of the whole process. I mean, I'm not sure you guys talk to other graphic novel or comic book folks. The collaboration it takes so much to do these books, because you obviously have the illustrator, could have a separate person doing color, you could have another person doing the lettering, we have the editor, there's a book designer, all the so you're working, but that's the best part to me, has always been the collaboration. And it's never been the dictatorship where I say, well, it's going to be this way. I mean, I welcome and have welcomed you end up working with such talented people. It'd be foolish not to take their ideas and suggestions and work them in if the possibility exists. So yeah, I mean, my thought maybe was more putting Tom going forward, but when we talked about it, it seemed to work best, and in the end, it comes down to what's best for the story. So fortunately, I work with, like I said, such a great talented group that we made that decision going forward. But it was something that we talked a lot about, had a lot of emails going back and forth with exclamation points and things like that, trying to make our points. And but I think it worked out for the best.
Well, Howard, another question I have for you is the publisher of your books, Animal Media Group. Now, Animal Media Group is based in Pittsburgh as well, and I'm wondering about your connection to your publisher.
Exactly, yes. Animal Media Group is part of Animal Inc. Animal Inc. is a visual effects studio, and I actually work for Animal Inc. I'm the controller. That's my regular or day job, if you will. And so Animal Media Group started up about 4 years ago when we did a documentary called Blood Brother, which won 2 awards at Sundance back in 2013. And the star, I guess, of the documentary, a guy named Rocky Bharat, he had actually done a book about his experiences over in India. The documentary is about him and how he was kind of like a drifter, slacker type, but he goes over to India and does this amazing work with kids infected with HIV at a hostel over in Chennai, India. So he had actually done a book, and so we sort of built the company around that book, and we donated all the proceeds to a charity that was set up for Rocky. So we started the company then, and I had actually gone through a situation with Stereotypical Freaks where it was I was with a publisher who ended up going out of business, and I also went to a second publisher then who had been interested in the book before that, and they were still interested, but they wanted me to basically change the whole book around and change the ending, which I told them was going to change the whole book. So. And they wanted a lot of creative control. So basically I went to our owner and said, well, look, we have the publishing company. I have this book, would you be interested in publishing it? And so kind of went from there. And so Animal Media Group has grown. We have about 10 books that are out now or coming out. And we also have a film side, and TV side. And one of our we actually have a show coming out on ABC in mid-season replacement called Downward Dog. That will be on ABC, I believe, in February or March. Still deciding about when that's going to premiere. But so yeah, it's a media company, and just worked out well, and sort of right place at the right time.
Yeah, and our listeners can find out more about the Animal Media Group by going to animalmediagroup.com, correct?
Exactly, yep.
Well, Howard, as a way of wrapping up, tell us a little bit about what other kind of publicity you have lined up for Hockey Karma. Where are you going to be? Who are you going to be speaking with?
Yeah. Well, I was last week, I was in New York for a week, and I was on an event called Comic Book Live, which I was on the Nerdist, and the podcast is available now. I'm going to be I did, 9 radio interviews, various sports shows or general interest shows really around the country. And there's the NHL Sirius XM channel. I was on with those guys. I'm going to go back to Toronto first week of December and do hopefully some more radio stuff there. The book's available in Canada, so definitely want to go to Toronto. And hopefully there's a couple other podcasts hopefully lining up hockey related as well. So all the information is as you said on animalmediagroup.com, and it's been fun to talk. I really go back to the point of I really feel like anytime with my books that I'm just so thankful for the opportunity, because we work on them. It's a long process, and when it's finally done and you're able to talk about it, it's so much fun. And I believe in the idea of sharing. It's just a real thrill and something very special to me to be able to share the book and to be able to talk about it and talk about the characters and things like that. It really means a lot. So I do appreciate the opportunity with you guys and really anybody. When I'm always very, very thrilled to talk about the whole process. It's been a lot of fun. I actually started publishing when I was 40, so I came into it a little late in life, and it's just been a really wonderful thing to be able to do it and talk to such wonderful people over these last 11 years.
Well, that's great. I think you've upped our sports quotient a lot here, right, Derek?
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I always, it's like you're playing both ends of the spectrum, because I have like I said, there's definitely a hockey audience that there's really, especially in the U.S., there's really not that many hockey themed or hockey books per se, other than like bios and how-to books and things like that. There's really not stories per se. So I feel like that's an area that is definitely underserved. So I like that part of it, but I also, to everybody else, I don't want somebody to think and say, "Oh, geez, it's a sports story or hockey story." So it's kind of talking out both ends of my mouth, which I've been known to do. But it's really nice to be able to hopefully make both groups are hopefully happy and have a good story, a good character story, but also for the hockey folks out there that there is obviously a hockey element, and that's definitely to me a really group that hasn't been served as well, maybe as other sports like football, basketball, what have you. So.
Well, Howard, thank you very much for taking the time and being on the Comics Alternative. The new book, Hockey Karma, came out at the beginning of this month, and our listeners can find out more about this in the show notes and where to get a copy. So good luck with the success of this book, and maybe we'll talk with you again on your next hockey comics outing.
Well, I appreciate it. And Derek and Gwen, thank you both. It was a real thrill and a lot of fun for me to be able to speak with you both today. So thank you both very, very much.
Thanks so much, Howard.
Thanks.
Wow, Derek, that was really a fun conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah. And Howard's a really great guy. I'm glad that he let us know about Hockey Karma, because I have to tell you, before he got in touch with us about a month or two ago, I didn't know about this series, the Forever Friend series.
Yeah, and it sounds like he and his production company are doing some really progressive things, and I really hope that he will continue to work on his comics and work with these collaborators because, I really love hockey, so I have absolutely no trouble with more hockey comics. I think we need that.
Yeah, and you mentioned the company and the publisher. We should point out again to our listeners that if they want to find out more about the Animal Media Group, they can go to Animal Media Group, that's one word, .com. And, even though you can't find Hockey Karma or the other books of the Forever Friends series on their website, you can still find great comics at Discount Comic Book Service. So go to dcbservice.com. They're going to take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your books there, get in touch with us and let us know what you thought about our interview with Howard Shapiro. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message through SpeakPipe, or you can call us over the telephone. Our phone number is 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. You can also email us. We're two guys at comicsalternative.com. You can email me directly. I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com. And Gwen, how can people contact you directly?
Well, Derek, I'm at Gwen at comicsalternative.com, but you can also find us on Twitter, where we announce new content to our podcast and updates to our blog. And there we are at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right. But you can also find us elsewhere over social media, such as on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, and on iHeartRadio. And if you're an Android user, on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and the comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
That's great. Hey, Derek, this was so much fun.
Yeah, I had a great time. It's always fun doing these shows with you, review shows, interview shows, you name it.
I agree. Well, until next time, I'm Gwen.
And I'm Derek. We'll see you later.